don't think people living in Regent Park recognize that they were probably residing in, you know, one of the biggest assets of real estate in the downtown core.
We got the construction men, and they come over and gave us a bunch of bricks. And I don't want to cry.
People are not buying the fact that a mixed community is a leveling of the playing field.
What about the whole issue of gentrification?
Gentrification is when you kick poor people out and you put in rich people. That's what gentrification. When you mix incomes, that's about city building and healthy communities.
But there is a lot of newcomers. They don't understand the sense of the community.
You're telling me that my quality of life is going to get better because you're putting somebody else to live with me who lives better, then it's hard, right? Because you're telling me that I'm below that person.
The same type of crimes are still happening in the community.
Some people are going to tell you that the crime has increased.
Since the spring of last year, we've seen a significant spike in ugly gun gang violence.
It's concerning that, you know, with such a shortage on housing stock, public housing stock, that we've cultivated a mixed income community where we're actually reducing public housing.
What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it?
So my name is Christene Brown, and I'm a filmmaker and a novelist. So at Reelworld this year, I'm presenting my my latest film called Farewell Regent. And Farewell Regent is a feature documentary about, it's looking at the redevelopment of Regent Park, the big transformation that's going on in Regent Park, and it's basically taking the pulse of the community midway development. My inspiration for the project was that I grew up in Regent Park. I spent my formative years in Regent Park, and to walk through the Regent Park now, I don't recognize it anymore, and I wanted to capture the community when they were still the old, still there, and also capture some of the history, some of the rich history, some of the activism, and some of the stories, the many different stories, and the diverse experience of the people who live in the community.
For years, Toronto's Regent Park was a slum, a place where children played in dirty alleys and risked death on narrow streets. Replacing slums with modern housing costs money, but so do the crime and disease which breed in slums. The old squalid houses were being torn down. New buildings began to rise in place of the old slums. Thrifty Toronto expects Regent Park to pay off in hard cash saved and better citizens.
It's the oldest and the largest social housing project in Canada. And actually what's happening now is actually the largest redevelopment of social housing in North America. So it's a massive, massive project. It's taking, it's going to be about 20 years for them to finish the whole thing. So it's a massive project. I'm not sure how many acres or whatever there, I think it's, I can't remember what it's, I think it's 62 acres or something like that, but it's massive. Well, I'm hoping that viewers will, many different things, okay. I'm hoping that people will come away from it seeing Regent Park differently, because Regent Park has always been portrayed in a negative light. I want to show Regent Park as a community, as any other community that's undergoing gentrification, because gentrification is something that's happening not only in the city but all over the world. So I wanted to show the community and the vibrancy of the community. I wanted to talk about the need for social housing, because there's a desperate need right now. Right now just in Toronto alone, there are like 100,000 people on the waiting list, and they're only building like maybe 30 or 40 units per year. So the need is far outweighs whatever they're doing. So there's an urgency, and I want to add to that discussion of the importance of social housing, the importance of affordable housing, and the importance of doing something about the homelessness issue, because I also get into that as well too in the documentary as well. Every time I went into the community, I learned something more, and it made editing really hard, because there was always some more shit that I was learning about what was going on, and I wanted to include all of those stories, but I didn't have the space to include the stories. I can tell this. There's one really heartbreaking moment. I had my camera with me, but I did not turn my camera on. I was standing and speaking to an older woman in the seniors building, and she was sitting there, and bugs were literally crawling all over her. And this was the seriousness of the bed bug problem, to the point where she was no longer in her apartment. She was just in the lobby, but they were there. There was one on her face. That was actually the very first time I saw a bed bug, and I didn't actually know what it was. And then I reached and said, "You have something on your face." And I took it off of her face, and then I realized that there was also some in her pockets, and I said, "Oh my God, this is what?" You know, they were supposed to be improving the community and improving and making these new buildings, but things have not gotten any better. Things have been exasperated. There's still a lot of crime that's in the community. The drug trafficking is still there. So it has made a small problem larger, because you're adding to the population of the community. So yeah. So I really, people can talk very positive about what's happening in the community, because you're having these shiny new buildings, and you're having condos or whatever, but underlying all of that is some very negative things, and a lot of things that need to be looked at, because there are other communities that are also going to be redeveloped, and Regent Park is the first major one, and we have to learn from Regent Park and do things differently next time around, and do things actually different, because we're only midway through, and they're just in the process of finding a new developer. You have to do things better going forward.
So you basically seeing the film as educational, not just as entertainment. But politicians and people that could invest into communities and everything, they could learn a lot from the film.
I think so too, because I think it's an intimate portrait of a community in transition. It's an intimate portrait of gentrification and what it does to a community, what it does to individuals, people who work in the community, people who live in the community. It's an intimate portrait, and I think politicians, especially, and developers should look at the examples in the documentary and learn from them, and maybe correct them as they go forward. One of the reasons I wanted to do the film was I wanted to write a love letter to my community, because Regent Park is the place where I learned to ride my first bike. I had my first kiss, So it was the milestones, all those important milestones, and it's in a community that is known for the activism and resilience, and that is something that's not really talked about. There were people who were fighting to get the community center built, the first swimming pool built, and so all of that I wanted to include. And this whole idea of redevelopment it wasn't new at all. When I lived in Regent Park in the 1980s, they were talking about redeveloping Regent Park. But what has happened now is completely different from what people envisioned. First of all, they didn't envision that there would be condos there. They had envisioned that there would be thorough streets. That's something that people had talked about for a long time, because Regent Park was enclosed, and that it allowed a lot of criminal activities to go undetected. So the thorough streets was something that people wanted. They wanted, of course, better buildings, which they don't have, because the buildings are breaking down already after only a few years of being built. So all the things that people had envisioned hasn't been realized. They wanted more jobs for people in the community. That hasn't been realized. So many people see the development as a failure. The very first Regent Park, when it was developed in the 1940s and 50s, people see that as a failed experiment because it took 20 years before that started breaking down. But this new Regent Park, it's taking less time to break down. It's already breaking down. I show that on camera. The cabinet doors and the fixtures and everything are breaking down already. So something has to be done, and I'm hoping that if people see it, that you know, some adjustments will be made. My film is showing on October the 19th at 5 o'clock.
Okay. And how can people get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me. I have a website, ChristeneBrown.com. Christene spelled with an E and Brown spelled with an E. And yeah, they can get a hold of me there. I'm on Twitter and Facebook as well too. I think Reelworld is a very important film festival because it's small, it's intimate, and it's about the films, and it's about social change. And my film is about social change, and the pairing of the two together I think is very important, and I'm really excited about sharing my film at this particular festival.
The whole world
Worldwide
knows about
Entertainment
Tyler
TV.
Perry Studios in Atlanta. Absolutely huge.
I don't know what you're talking about, Drusilla. Girl, don't give me that. You know daggone right well what I'm talking about. What are you accusing me of?